what is the relevance of Advaita in today's world? Because we live in a time when artificial intelligence is on the rise, but also human stupidity is on the rise.
Today we are living in a world of virtual reality. Brahman alone is true. And to think that there is a second entity separately existing from Brahman, which is just virtual. Inside that virtual world, we have created another virtual reality. But if all the work is delegated to the machines, what is the human being going to do? That is where actually this Advaita Vedanta steps in.
Happiness is not something outside. Happiness is not something that will come from a change in the external world, but something that has to happen inside somehow.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaskaram. Before we begin this conversation that you all are so looking forward to, just a couple of guidelines. We live in a time when most of us store our prana in this device. So if I can request you to transfer it for the next 1.5 hours here, and whatever recording you want, you do from here and here, so that we're not caught up trying to capture information for social media and for constantly watching later. Let's take that invitation to be present to whatever is coming. On that same note, I want to say that today I have both the fortune and the slight disadvantage of moderating this session today. Fortune, understandably, because I'm seated in the presence of two luminaries. I say disadvantage because, to be honest, I'm a little envious of all of you who can just sit and internalize this entirely. The reason I say this is because the kind of vakjhari, the kind of flow of speech that comes from people who live the reality that they are studying, live the reality that they are teaching, is very different when somebody learns something as a textbook idea. So today the people that you see, Swamiji and Acharya, both are people who live the life of Vedanta. They live the life of Advaita. So when you hear them, I invite you to hear them from the heart, because what they're going to be speaking is not textbook dictatum. It is something that is coming from their years of swanubhava, from their years of lived experience. And on that same note, I'm also going to tell you that today we will be taking some questions during the course of this conversation. We would like you to be a part of this discussion from the time we begin. So we are not going to restrict the question and answer session till the very end. So what we are going to do, the structure for this evening's conversation is, we have 3 sections broadly. Each section will explore one aspect of Vedanta Shastra, and each section we have conceptualized in such a way that there is something for us to take back. Now, as we begin a section and as we come to the end of a section, if there are questions that you have pertaining to that section, I would just like to stress on that particularly, that we are taking questions with respect to that what has been spoken about in that section. You can write down your question on a piece of paper, and Smriti ji and the entire team of Ekatma Dham will be available to help you, and they will collect those questions. In the interest of time, we will take about 2 questions per section. I'd invite your questions to be from the heart, to so that you can come straight to what you would like to share. And also, as I said, if it is with respect to what has been shared, it will help us enhance the nuances of the conversation. So today, with that note of framework setting, if we were to look at this mammoth topic of Oneness Dialogues, of taking something so larger than life and then touching its surface, how would we go about it? I think the first question that we would like to give some prominence to is understanding that word that has brought all of us here. Oneness, Advaita, Vedanta. Many of these terms are used somewhat loosely, somewhat without exact clarity of what it means. So I think I'd like to start this conversation by asking Swamiji to just help us understand that word, these 3 words, Vedanta, Advaita, and then oneness, but least preference to oneness because it's an English word.
Hari Om, and good evening to all of you. So today we are going to discuss this, a great treasure which the rishis have left behind for the humanity, and which is encapsulated in one word, Advaitam. Very literally speaking, if we just translate it as we find in English books, it will be translated as non-dual. Is it not? Non-dual. Now, again, non-dual is just a word. How do we try to understand this? So, our great rishis, usually, these ideas are very difficult to be conveyed verbally. This is the one big admission made by our rishis, Vedas itself. What we are going to talk about is actually indescribable. No words, no sounds can confine it or encapsulate it. So our rishis, they have used some upamas, some analogy to understand what this Advaita is. Because Advaita is not an object like this table or this chair or anything that you can just show. See, this is the object that we are discussing here. So some upamas, like upamas means some illustrations. One beautiful illustration given by all our teachers is, you see, there is a mass of clay. Clay. A potter would use this clay to make pots, jars, plates, tumblers, and different items. Now, if you just look into these pots or the jars or the plates, either we can describe it as a pot, or there is another way of describing it. For the wise person will not say that it is a pot. It is clay. It is the clay which is in the shape of the pot. The clay and the pot are not two different and distinct entities. It is one entity which is appearing in the form of the pots, the jars, and the plates, etc. So essentially, Advaita means this non-dualism. Now, if you take, this is an illustration, this is an upama, but what is it illustrating? As Bhagwan Shankaracharya so beautifully summarizes the Supreme Reality as Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, what he means to say that there is no second distinct separate entity called Jagat existing separated from Brahman. It is Brahman itself. The idea of a second independent entity existing is what is owing to illusion. So, I always say Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya should be understood as Brahma Satyam Dvaita Mithya. This Mithyatvam of the Jagat, it is pointing out at the Mithyatvam of Dvaitam itself. Dvaitam means the idea that a second entity apart from Brahman is existing. Actually speaking, there is no second distinct, independent reality called a world existing separated from Brahman. So in and through this illustration, we can understand what Advaita is. Between the clay and the pot, if you just look into this illustration, clay and the pot are not two distinct things. Clay and ore.
Beautiful. I think that example puts a lot into perspective about what are we seeing. Most of the time we are seeing the pot or the object that is coming from the clay, but the underlying reality is that of the clay itself. This study of Advaita, the study of Vedanta, in this country, it's been going on for centuries. As you said, it is the tapas of rishis, it is the wisdom that they received and that they've passed on. So somewhere, even if we aren't familiar with the exact terminology or what exactly that school of philosophy stands for, somewhere in this country, it's in our fabric. We have some relationship with the idea of Vedanta. But that leads me to ask, Acharya, coming from the other side of the stream of consciousness, in the West, how is Vedanta perceived? Because in Bharatavarsha, the idea of exploring Vedanta somewhere, like I said, it's a given. In our homes, in our practices, in our culture, there is an underlying thread of it that somewhere holds it. But in the Western countries, that may or may not be the case. So if someone were to explore Vedanta there, what does Vedanta mean over there? I'd love to hear from you.
Namaskaram, everyone. So, if we understand the Brazilian culture, it's a place that was colonized by many different countries. And we have people from everywhere, from Europe, from Africa, from United States, from India. People, everybody is there. And religion there has done a very terrible job, in terms of suppressing the local culture for a long time. So people there, they are very open to spirituality, but very against religion, because they don't want to be cheated again, So one of the big challenges that we have when we present Vedanta is because people are afraid it's a new religion that is coming, And so they will inquire, why are you using these clothes? I said, this is the clothes that we use in South India, If you practice karate, you're going to use a kimono. It's not a religion, If I use these clothes, it's a message of a culture, Not that there is no religion involved, that is, but that's not the point, So you should not be focused on what I'm wearing, but what I'm saying, So this shift in the mind is very necessary in the beginning, to show them that Vedanta is a tool. Is a tool available in the Vedic culture, and lots of gratitudes to Bharata and all the people that has upheld them. And because of them, this tool is available for everyone. Everyone that connects to the idea that happiness is not something outside. And when the person is prepared to listen to that, and he says, oh, happiness is not something that will come from a change in the external world, but something that has to happen inside somehow, they get hooked. They want to know more. Then there is a second moment where we have to build Shraddha. Because we cannot present, we can introduce Vedanta with all these things, but when you have to teach the proper way, So then we reintroduce the tradition from another perspective, understanding the culture where it comes from, and understanding that nobody is obliged to do anything in life, and the energy of spirituality is the energy of freedom, So you will see something that you won't see in India and Brazil. For example, I have a bishop studying Vedanta, think about that, And people would say, why you teach him? Because he's truly wanting to know, And in Brazil, there is no sannyasis. Every people that want to have a spiritual life, they have to go to the church. They have a spiritual connection, and that's the only place they go, In Brazil, we'll see people from African traditions studying Vedanta. They will come to the class, study Vedanta. Then on the weekends, they will go to their, field where they do their spiritual practice, and they will incorporate deities and talk to people and guide people. But when they are back on their ego, they need to know, what is happiness, and they come back to Vedanta. In Brazil, you see indigenous people that pray to nature and use many different medicines, doing japa in the middle of the Amazon forest with a Ganesha, and they just have no prejudice, if this is going to help me, why can't I use it, So there is a very objective vision, is this working and making me a better person? I can slowly trust and accept and test, so that's how it has been spreading.
Beautiful. I'm just amazed at how, when you look outside the country, something that we take for granted, we tend to take for granted, I will not generalize, but for us, because it's available, somewhere we tend to believe it's always going to be there. But I think for a civilization that has been outside of this geographical influence, for them, the value of it becomes that much more special. And you brought up something interesting, that they see it as something irrespective of what stream of life, what faith, what belief system they come from. Vedanta is something that helps them remain anchored. So that that idea of Vedanta has remained as a constant thread across centuries, across yugas, if we had to look at timelines, right? The idea that this is something that can help us through life. And if we were to look, I don't think it's possible to talk about Advaita Vedanta without talking about Bhagavatpada Shankaracharya's contributions to it. One question that I'm curious to hear from both of you is, what, in your opinion, has been Shankara's greatest contribution to the spreading of Advaita? So I'd love to hear both your takes on this, because I just want to clarify, many of us think that Shankar Bhagavatpada is responsible for Advaita. It is not his philosophy. It is not a philosophy that he created. It is something that he actively propagated, something that he internalized and shared with the world. And that rich treasure is something, I think there are two people far more qualified than me to speak about that. So I just wanted to set that context and then have you speak a little bit about Bhagavatpada's contribution to Advaita Siddhanta and his passion for it.
It's a wonderful question. See, Bhagavatpada's name is inseparably connected with this term called Advaita. We all know this very well. And his contribution to this philosophy has been revolutionary. I want to use the word revolutionary in a very absolute sense, not figuratively. What I mean to say is that. So we will have to go to a little bit to the roots of the whole thing. See, everything emerges from the Vedas. For the benefit of the viewers, most of you may be knowing that the Vedas are not books. It's a Ananta Jnana Rashi or Shabda Rashi, as Shankaracharya defines it. It's a treasure of universal, eternally existing spiritual laws, which have been discovered by great people called rishis from time to time. So the Vedas are full of mantras. And if you just look into the Vedic lore or the Vedic literature, the largest chunk of the Vedas is all Karmakanda, Purvamimamsa. Actually, the Upanishadic statements are very less. I don't know how to put it in percentage-wise, but I think more than 95% of the Vedas, it's all Purva Mimamsa, dealing with rituals. And behind the rituals, there is pure science involved in that. Yeah. And the Upanishadic statements are all spread here and there. The Upanishadic Vakyas, which deal with the supreme reality. See, the one, before I go into the subject of Shankaracharya's contribution in this area, I need to, because you had asked in the first question, what do we mean by Vedanta? Actually, Vedanta means Upanishads. Vedanta means Upanishads. And you see, the relevance of Upanishads to all of us. Upanishad literally means that which puts an end to the samsara. Or you may say that which puts an end to all our sufferings permanently, irreversibly. So Upanishad refers to a vidya. It refers to a knowledge which, when acquired, it puts an end permanently to all human sufferings. So we should first understand the connection of what we are talking about with our own lives. It is a serious matter. Tell me, who is there who doesn't want to put an end to sufferings in life? Nobody wants to be suffering endlessly. We are all seeking solutions and we are all trying to find out ways to put an end to our miseries and sufferings. Upanishad is the only thing, literally only thing, which can put an end to human sufferings permanently. So, these Upanishadic statements in the Vedas, they were all scattered here and there. So, pre-Shankara situation, if you have to understand the contribution of this greatest master which we have in our tradition, we should first understand what was the scenario before the advent of this great master. Of course, we had Sri Krishna's Bhagavad Gita, amazing work. I always say Bhagavad Gita is the It is the cream of the Vedas and the practical application of the Advaitic Siddhanta in our day-to-day life. But yet, the philosophical structure was not very clear. As I said, in the Vedas, essentially, the largest chunk of Vedas is full of Purva Mimamsa Karmakanda. Here and there we come across Vedic, the Upanishadic statements about Parabrahman. Now, before Shankaracharya, there existed different so-called interpreters of the Vedas, and everyone interpreted the Vedas in the way it was convenient and suitable for his own ideology. And there was no one clear picture of what actually Vedas talk about and what is the essence of the Vedas. And most of the time, all these so-called interpreters, they would tilt towards the karma portion. And we all had the great Kumarila Bhatta and Prabhakaras. So they were all great Mimamsakas. They were all great people. We are not underestimating that. In fact, I always say that we have to be very grateful to the Purva Mimamsakas. It is they who really preserve the culture of the Vedas, because it is this karmakanda rituals which actually kept the culture alive through ages. Nevertheless, the philosophy of non-duality was, yet it was not clear. It was Shankaracharya, this great teacher, who, what he did, from the vast pool of karmakandic ideas, in the midst of which we find Upanishadic Vakyas spread out here and there, he picked up that, and from that mess of a pool, he created a beautiful structure of Advaita, and he gave it to the world. It was Shankaracharya who made it clear that the essential idea of the Vedas is actually not karma, but it is only Brahman and Brahman alone, which is our true nature. This was Shankaracharya's absolute contribution to the humanity, because before him, this picture was not clear, though it was there. As our Vinay told that, you see, Shankaracharya is not the creator of Advaita. Advaita is an experience which is eternally existing. Advaita as an experience is no one's creation. It is eternally existing. But Advaita as a philosophy, as a clear structure based upon pure reasoning and the Shruti, this was the, I should say, the invaluable contribution of Shankaracharya to the humanity. After him, literally speaking, everybody is just repeating him. This is what is happening. So this is the great contribution of Shankaracharya.
Okay. Acharya, anything you'd like to add to that?
I will just add some few ideas that he told was what I was going to tell. But we can also see Sri Shankaracharya as the union of three very different Shaktis, Like if you think about life, we have the power of logic and all the science. We have the art in its form. We have spirituality and all this spiritual Shakti that's available for people, in all these things. And he has the three, So he's like an embodiment, it's like an avatar, for that came prepared to do this job. So it's a person with a high logic standard that is a poet. And at the same time, very, let's say, cleansed as a person, and connected to the divine, So all these contributions Swami told about, and he also crafted a very nice context for the parampara to keep going, that are all songs that are sung in temples and all the pujas that we know come from him.
That's a beautiful union of three seemingly distinct ideas: logic, art, and then spirituality. What we look at as compartments, if you pick up Bhagavad Pada's works, you will see three of them flowing together as one stream of thought. My Guruji always says something very beautiful. He says that Shankaracharya gave us two kinds of Sharadas. You all know that he established 4 pithas in the 4 corners of Bharatavarsha. Amongst them, in the Dakshinamnaya Peetham in Sringeri, in modern-day Karnataka, he established a Vigraham of Sharada Devi, the ruling goddess of knowledge. This is Aradhya Sharada, the Sharada that we pray to. But Shankaracharya also gave us Adhyayana Sharada, Sharada that we can constantly go to and do Adhyayana of, to be able to internalize. You look at his commentaries, be it the Brahma Sutra Bhashyas, you look at the voluminous works, there is no Devata who Shankaracharya has not done a stuti of. And in all of that, you will see exactly what Acharya said. You will see logic, you will see poetry, and you will see Advaita Bhav. All of them will flow together with the confidence that only somebody who is experiencing Advaita, they alone can have. So I think with this introduction into the world of Advaita, into the world of Shankaracharya's relationship with Advaita, we move into a section that I think becomes relevant for us to understand today. That is, what is the relevance of Advaita in today's world? Because we live in a time when artificial intelligence is on the rise, but also human stupidity is on the rise. So between these two, when we have somewhere, as a generation, given up some of our intellectual faculties to technology and believe that this has the answer to everything, we are standing at a very crucial juncture where we have to understand the role of technology. We have to be able to understand how, if this wave sweeps us, we will lose something so precious that has been handed down to us by the generations that came before us. So in that context, if we had to understand why Advaita is important, why are all of us sitting here in a discussion where we are just looking at this word Advaita and we are spending so much of time on it, why is it important today? Swamiji, can you tell us a little bit about why it's relevant in today's world?
See, the very term, as I said, Vedanta, makes us understand. It makes us know that this is something which is indispensable. We cannot do away with Vedanta. Why? As I said, we are all wanting to be free from misery in life. That is the natural instinct of every living creature on the planet. Every living creature wants to be happy and free from misery. So what is that which can bring this about? That is the question. So that is where actually this Vedanta and Advaita Vedanta comes into picture, because this is the one thing which can free the human beings from misery in life. There is no other, everything else is just like a cosmetic something. It is not, it may give you a kind of a relief for some time, but it is not going to solve the problem unless we understand who we are. That is the point. Now, Vinay has touched upon a very important a segment, artificial intelligence and this digital world in which we are living today. Of course, I am not an authority to speak on this area as such, but with my general understanding about what it is all about, I can just share my views on the subject. If you just look into this digital world in which we are living, it is very interesting. Jagat is mithya. The snake which appears on the rope, we all know that rope and snake illustration. In the dark, when you see something, there is on the path something lying there, and in the semi-dark state, we mistake it to be a snake. Is it not? But is the snake really existing there? It isn't that. But for the time being, owing to absence of clarity, we perceive that which is a rope to be a snake. Now, this is what precisely is happening with all of us. Shankaracharya greatly, very beautifully, he keeps on hammering this idea in his bhashyas everywhere, mistaking one thing for something else. So you may say the other thing is actually speaking, to put it in our so-called, the language of digital world, the other thing is actually a virtual reality. It's not an absolute reality, is it not? Today we are living in a world of virtual reality. The digital world is a virtual reality. It is a virtual reality inside a virtual world. something like that. Brahman alone is true, and to think that there is a second entity separately existing from Brahman, it is something like something which is not real, which is just virtual. And inside that virtual world, we have created another virtual reality. And today the situation is such that it is becoming difficult to distinguish between the virtual world and the real world. The line of separation is becoming blurred. It is becoming blurred day by day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this is a very serious problem. As it is, this Jagat is mithya. And in this mithya Jagat, we have created another virtual world in which we are trapped now with a tremendous sense of realism about it. As it is, we have an unquestioned sense of realism about what we are seeing here. And inside that, now we have created a virtual world. Just imagine, it's like a trap within a trap. And this is going on. So this digital addiction, which we find in the present generation, which is literally speaking, is the biggest challenge for the modern time. I don't think so. There has been any invention in the human history which has been so challenging. When the fire was invented, the wheel was invented, the electricity was invented, it was all helping the human being in different ways. Yes, this digital revolution is also helping the human beings in different ways, but it is also becoming a cause of disruption of the human society on the other side. We know that. Now, this artificial intelligence, I will just put forth one view to all of you. The experts say this artificial intelligence is going to take away, it is going to do many of the jobs which we usually do manually. Automation. Many of the things which are going to get automated in the and it's not very far away. It is already happening. It is not at a great distance. Very soon, the next 1 or 2 decades, we will be seeing many things which we are doing manually today. It is going to be automated. Now, the big question comes here. If everything becomes automated, this is my perception actually, then as human beings, we will not have many things which we are doing now. We will be delegating it to the machines or robots or whatever it is. Then ultimately, what is the human being going to do? If all our day-to-day activities we are going to delegate it to the machines, that means we will be having plenty of times, hundreds and hundreds of hours every week and every month, spare time. The question will be, what is this man or a woman going to do with that extra large chunk of time? See, human beings' tendency is that human beings always search for meaning in and through the work which he or she does. And when we have delegated most of the work to the machines, maybe the life may turn out to be meaningless. Human beings this is natural for all human beings to find meaning in something which we are doing. But if all the work is delegated to the machines, what is the human being going to do? How is he going to find meaning in life? And what is he going to do with the large chunk of, I should say, the spare time which he has with him in future? We are actually speaking, Advaita Vedanta has to step in. How is this human life going to become meaningful? So see, if he is not utilizing his spare time in the right way, as we know, if the person has nothing to do or very less to do, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. Either he will turn into, or he will be going towards doing things which we are not supposed to do. Or if he is intelligent, that is where actually this Advaita Vedanta steps in. The spare time, and to make the life meaningful and purposeful, this is where the self-inquiry should start. In ancient times in India, actually, Swami Vivekananda very beautifully describes, India was a land of plenty. We go back into the history. And when you have plenty, there is not much struggle. There is not much struggle at the physical plane as far as the human being is concerned. And when there is not much struggle, the human being tends to go within. And if the nature is also very favorable. So Swami Vivekananda is painting that picture of the Himalayas where people lived in such a surrounding that their minds tended to go within to find meaning in life. So you see, when we human beings with the artificial intelligence standing in front of us, with plenty of spare time for all of us, how is this human being, all of us, going to make our life meaningful? What is the purpose of human life? These existential questions will begin to pinch every human being, and he will begin to search for answers. That is where Advaita Vedanta will have to step in the future decades, when we will find that our every other work is being done by machines, by robots, by humanoids, and all these things are going to come. It is already there. It's happening. Listen.
I think that answer beautifully summarizes the juncture that we're at, where how we use technology. It is wrong to brand technology as a bad thing, because without it, a lot of our lives would not look the way they are. So there are downsides to allowing it to govern us. Technology is much like an emotion. As long as the emotion is in your control, all is good. But if you become in the control of the emotion, then go in. But having said that, I think it's also equally important to understand how technology can help further a cause as fundamentally basic as Advaita. And I think Acharya can talk about that with respect to your own experience of how technology has helped you sit and share that message of Advaita and touch so many people beyond boundaries. I'd love to hear more about it.
That's something important for us to talk about, because for some reason, very traditional people, orthodox people, they have, how I say, technology allergy. Just think about if Swami Shankaracharya had a recorder, he would record, he would not write, we would have been seeing him. When I start giving online classes in Brazil, like almost 12 years ago, many people criticize me, and they were all listening to Swami Paramarthanandaji's CDs, But if you have a video, why? And if I can be live with my teacher, is even better, The fact is, we should not be afraid of technology. We have to understand that anything in life has two sides, one positive, one negative. So if you start to give online classes, you're going to lose the personal connection that happens. So you should have a moment to have a personal connection. And in fact, in Brazil, like, my experience is very good with that, because before, I was studying with my teacher every day of the week. And I would go to work, and then after work, I would go to the institute and stay like 1 hour in traffic, 15 minutes waiting, 1 hour of class, 1 hour back to home, every day. Imagine how much time we are spending, and it's the effort of the time. I'm not complaining, but understand, the real interaction that I had at that time was 15 minutes per day. With 50 students, it's almost zero interaction. So it's an illusion. Suddenly, when everybody could be like 2 hours more in day, because 1 hour traffic, 15 minutes of that, they are at home. They are listening more calmly, more peacefully. And then, you know what? I told them, if we are going to do online classes, we have to meet on the weekends, because we need to interact, so that we have satsang, and we can do other things also study Vedanta, And suddenly it became better than before. So, like, if we understand technology, we can use it for our advantage, that's my point. And also, like, all this AI and things that are happening, I would like to add, it's not only a revolution in terms of jobs, There is a philosophical revolution that it's going to happen. First, a philosophical collapse, Why? Because, first, if you go to ChatGPT today and ask from all the philosophies which one is the best, he'd say Advaita Vedanta. Something very interesting to see. And actually, this is something that I even provoke, like, everybody that's working for this knowledge. We should write articles to feed ChatGPT, But not like saying, oh, Vedanta is great. It's showing the flaws that when you compare Vedanta with other things, because ChatGPT and the other artificial intelligence, they are like the Google, the YouTube of tomorrow, So this has to be there so that people know that they should study Vedanta. They will not ask their parents anymore. They will ask ChatGPT, and ChatGPT should know, so we have to prepare it. But what's the philosophical collapse? Is like going together with Swami just has told, life is structured now around work. The time, like we wake up in the morning, we go to work, we come back. When this is not there. Now people have the idea that this life will give happiness somehow. So there is a philosophy behind this Western way of thinking, this capitalist way of thinking. And this will collapse. And suddenly people will ask, where is happiness? And there is nothing for people to do. Like, what is the way? By ourselves, we are not happy. So it's not just a work problem. There will be a very difficult moment, spiritually speaking, because in general, people don't have this answer, And I think also this is an opportunity for Vedanta and the Vedic culture to spread everywhere. People will know because this is useful. And actually, imagine if I don't need to work and I can only do my sadhanas, that's the best thing in the world, So we have a tremendous opportunity.
So I think as long as technology is harnessed and it's held properly, essentially, it can be a tool of great power. And that also brings me again back to think about Bhagavad Pada and his contribution without a tool like technology, right? What he was able to do for not just that generation, but for centuries later, when we are sitting here, if we look at what unifies this country and what philosophy unifies us, it essentially is Advaita. The idea that we can be humble enough to bow down in front of a sea of people, creatures, plants, every living and non-living / animate, inanimate being, and still see divinity in everything and see the same divinity that we see in ourselves. That way of life, one person was able to do it without any of these things. It just leaves the mind absolutely boggled thinking about how. But this is what he saw was with respect to unifying lands. Lands that were divided by space, lands that were divided by languages, by cultures, by practices. Essentially, what did he do? He unified them, saying we're all made of the same, as Swamiji said, we're all made of the same clay, we're all pots made of the same clay. He helped us remember that Upanishadic truth. But today, India is very different. Today, the distinctions that we make between ourselves, the idea of division between us is more than ever before, if I can venture and be gutsy enough to say that. And I think that's where Advaita becomes important, because if we remain with these differences, I belong to so-and-so practice, I belong to this, I belong to that, within sects of Sanatana Dharma, we are fighting. Then outside of that, we are fighting. Essentially, we're fighting a lot. But at the core, something is missing because we've forgotten something very, very fundamental, which is we're all made of the same thing. So Swamiji, I'd like to ask you about that idea of India today is somewhere affected by this deep sense of division, and somewhere technology has also played its part, both in a good and in a bad way, in increasing this. How do we navigate through this? How can Advaita help us remember that?
Actually, it's very, very vital question today, in today's Indian scenario. And not only Indian scenario, actually world scenario itself. But let us start with the Indian profile of it. If you just look at it is very interesting. If you just look into the videos available on the social media and all, wherever the discussion about India is going about, the social media, you will find great debates. Everybody has got different narratives about what is India's roots. They all talk about all kinds of narratives, but not the main thing. It's a very interesting thing. You will find in all the debates related to India and India's cultural and civilizational roots, somebody will ascribe it to the recent constitution. It is constitution which is uniting us. Fine, it's true. In a very technical and a political sense, it is the constitution of India which is uniting us. But what about the India which has been existing from the timeless past? Which constitution existed then? Even then, India had a people speaking multitudes of languages and professing different faiths. Different faiths in the sense, I'm talking faiths within the Vedic fold itself, even before the advent of the Semitic religions in this country. So we had different sampradayas, different forms of worships, everything. But what was the root? What was exactly the root of all that? That thing today we have totally forgotten. Now, if you just look into the strategy of this great, what should I say? It's difficult to describe Bhagavad Gita using just one term. It was a phenomenon whose vision was, if you just look at it from the India standpoint, his vision was to first of all take India back to the Vedic roots. India, which was divided even during his times into, if you just look into the Indian scenario at that time in the 8th century AD, politically it was all divided into small kingdoms. Everybody is busy with his own region. Socially also we were divided in so many different lines. People were blindly, without knowing the essential philosophy, they were following different faith systems. Some were Shaktas, some were Vaishnavas, some were Shaivas, some were Ganapatyas, and so on. Now, and they were all quarreling with each other without knowing the roots. Where lies our roots? Now, the great contribution of Shankaracharya, and which we have to adopt today, was to go back to the roots of the Indian civilization and culture. And look at his genius of this person. What did he do? He took everyone to the roots and showed that, see, all of you, what you're doing, they're all perfectly fine. But understand that it is all the worship of one entity in so many forms. So it is so interesting to remember that this great Advaitic teacher was also the person who started the puja paddhati. The puja paddhati, the rituals, which we are having in the temples today, this is the one which he had started. Look at the beauty of it. And he made it mandatory that you may be a Shaiva, you may be a Shakta, you may be a Ganapatya, you may be a Saurya, or whatever it is. Everyone in his puja has to worship all the deities, because all these deities are nothing but the expressions of the same Brahman. All the pots and jar, and they are all. So this great strategy which Shankaracharya had adopted, this is the secret of unifying not only India. Now, this is applicable not only for Indians. This is the solution for all the conflicts which we have across the globe. There's a beautiful, I'm remembering that one beautiful shloka which is coming in my mind. Rajyam Narendrasya Bhatasya Khetakaha Tayor Apohe Abhato Narajaha. He says in Viveka Chodamani, Shankaracharya says, Rajyam Narendrasya Bhatasya Khetakaha Tayor Apohe Abhatam Naraja. So, what makes a person Raja and other person a Bhata? A Raja is a person who has got a kingdom, and Bhata means a soldier. A soldier is a soldier as long as he is wielding a shield and a sword. And a Raja is a Raja as long as he is having a kingdom. If you remove the kingdom from the Raja, and if you remove the so-called sword and the shield from the soldier, there is neither Raja nor the soldier. There is only the human being. Just look at the magnanimity of this. You remove the superimposed ideas. These are all superimposed ideas that I am so and so. Even the idea that I am an Indian or Jonas is a Brazilian. These are all upadhis. You remove the upadhis of being a Brazilian and an Indian, where do we land up? Being a pure human being. And that is not the end. Even human being is also an upadhi. Ultimately, we have to end up in discovering ourselves as pure consciousness. So this was the strategy of taking the entire humanity caught up in a cesspool of diversity to the root of oneness. To understand the diversity as the expression of the one. That was Shankaracharya's great strategy, which he adopted, and which I would say, which is the only way to unify the globe. This is the great crux of the Vedic thought, which is the cream of the Vedic thought, which is expressed in the beautiful term called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Beautiful idea of Vasudha itself is a Kutumbakam. And Vasudha doesn't mean only the planet. Vasudha, here we should be taking it as the entire cosmos itself. The entire cosmos with its living, non-living, animate, inanimate, everybody. It's all one family because it's all the expression of the same reality. This strategy perhaps we all will have to adopt in the modern times. Not perhaps, it has to be. There is no other way. As long as the humanity is not taken back to their roots, there is no end to this human conflicts. It will keep on going on.
Because Dvaita Bhavam is always there in the world.
Absolutely. As long as you take this world for granted. Presently, the problem is as long as the vichara doesn't start, as long as this investigation into reality doesn't start, there is no end to the confusion with which we have become used to live with. The only way to do away with this cloud of confusion is to start vichara, investigation. That's why I always say, we human beings, being human beings, if you don't become a seeker of truth, we are missing a great opportunity. This is what Bhagavad Pada says in some of his beautiful works.
What Swamiji touched upon, what Bhagavad Pada did, is not only help us remember that supreme truth of Advaita, but also helped us remember that all the differences that we're looking at, and most of us spend our time, even within the domain of Sanatana Dharma, fighting about whether this side is greater, this side is greater. Our lives go into this. There is zero vicharana. There Shiva and Vishnu are not fighting up, but here we are all WhatsApp warriors about who is greater. And that's why Bhagavad Pada's phenomenal contribution to the world of Sampradaya is this concept, as many of you would be knowing, which is called, he is called as Shanmata Sthapakacharya. He helped us look at 6 different streams of thought, 6 different forms of Paramatma, and came to one conclusion saying these 6 are all 6 expressions of one Paratattva. I'm sure all of you know this, but just to bring us onto the same page, those 6 forms, the first one, the order is variable, but the 6 essentially cover, if you consider Vishnu or any form of Vishnu to be Paramatma, then you become a Vaishnava. So Vaishnavam is the first. Next is Shaivam, when you consider Shiva or forms of Shiva. The third is Shaktam, when you believe Shakti is Paramatma Swarupini. Then comes Ganapatyam, when you believe Ganapati is Paramatma Swarupa. Then comes Skandam, when you believe Skanda or Kartikeya is the supreme truth. And finally comes Sauram, in which you believe Surya is the supreme truth. Now the interesting thing about this is, if you look at the geographical developments of each of these matas, for example, Ganapatya, which is a state that you associate, which is a place that you associate the most with Ganapati worship, Maharashtra. Because Ganapatyam emerged from there. Ganapati emerged from Mayurakshetram or Morgaon. That is where that entire Vidya, Ganapati Vidya started there and continued there, which is a place that you would associate with, say, Skandam. Tamil Nadu. Because Muruga's Upasana was deepest there. So, geographically, each of these grew in different places. Philosophically, they strengthened themselves and then traveled across the country, and different experiences added into that richness of understanding that faith. And Bhagavad Pada came at a time when these faiths were fighting with each other. And he said, no, this is what we have to be able to look beyond. And that Tattva Vicharana, we still have to do. Because it is something he said long, long ago. But are we doing it? Because somewhere, when Upasana increases, when our spiritual practices increase, when our ritualistic practices increase, very subtly from the back door, Ahankara also makes an entry. Saying, oh, I am doing this. This is a little greater. Oh yeah, I belong to this faith. This faith is greater than that faith. If we are not conscious of that equalizing factor that Swamiji was talking about, saying, beyond all these terminologies, beyond all these clothes, underlying is one common element. We are all nirupadhi. We don't have an upadhi. These are all just identities that we are donning. So in that context, when we look at what he has done for us, today, whichever mata we belong to, whichever sampradaya we belong to, we truly owe it to Shankaracharya for that sampradaya to be alive. So I think that brings us to the next segment of what we want to explore. And before we go ahead, just a reminder, if there are questions that are pressing for you and there is something that is coming up, there are...
Vinay, just
Yes.
one. Sure. One small thing, just to add to what Vinay had said. And look at this teacher's vision. See, he was living some 1200 years back at a time which we cannot even visualize today. At that time, this person is thinking about unifying the whole of the Indian subcontinent. What a vision. It is said that, see, we are today having vehicles and aeroplanes to travel up and down. This person standing on the southernmost tip, he is looking at the Himalayas, and he is thinking to start one matham there, and one in the south, one in the east, and one in the west, to unify this entire Indian subcontinent. It's all about unification, unification, unification. That's the main.
Through wisdom.
Through wisdom.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, if there are questions that are pressing for you and you'd like to share anything, if you just write down your question and you can pass it on, or you can raise your hand and let one of the members from Ekatma Dham, just let them know what the question is. They'll pass it on. I think there are some questions coming our way. Before we proceed, we'll just take these two questions. Swamiji, there's one for you, and Acharya, there is one for you. Swamiji, the question for you is, Swamiji, is it possible as a youngster in such a divided and conflicted world to bring about or talk about the idea of universal oneness? How does one start that? Yes. One Shankaradut.
It's a beautiful thing. You see, how to start? Why is it not why is it not possible at all? I don't understand. It is absolutely possible. If it had not been possible, Shankaracharya would not have preached it. Vivekananda would not have preached it. Not only all the great teachers, they all were the spokesperson of the supreme reality, which is non-dual. Whether it is the Rishis of the Upanishads, Sri Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita, amazing. So they were all talking about this non-dual reality, and if it was not possible to be actualized in your life and my life, then it is useless. Krishna was talking to this to Arjuna, who was standing at the battlefield. Just tell me, which other situation can be more demanding than a person who is standing in the battlefield in front of an array of enemies? It's a high tense moment, and in the middle of that, Sri Krishna is telling about how he has to negotiate the situation with the highest wisdom. So that itself shows the 100% possibility of this great vision to be actualized in our everyday life. If it is not like that, then the whole thing is just useless. But that's not the case. All the great teachers have shown the practicality of this great wisdom. Swami Vivekananda very beautifully says, if what we are talking about, this pure consciousness, it is referred by two terms, all of you might have heard it, Atman and Brahman. Actually, our true nature is Atman. We are all Atmans only. These human forms, they are all just clothings put over the pure consciousness, which is Atman. It is that pure consciousness which is the very substratum or the very seabed of our personality. That is the truth. Now, Swami Vivekananda says very beautifully, he says, you see, if a fisherman knows that he is an Atman, he will be a better fisherman. If a lawyer knows that he or she is an Atman, he will be a better lawyer. If a student knows that he or she is a student, he or she will be a better student. If a doctor knows that he or she is a Atman, that person will be a better doctor. This is the practical application of this highest wisdom in our transactional plane. Wherever you bring this light of Atman to be expressed in our action, you will see you will be acting more and more perfectly. All the imperfections begin to slowly go away. So this is very much possible.
And I think Swamiji's message, especially about when Bhagavad Gita was delivered to Arjuna, because today somewhere there is this notion that yes, Vedanta, yes, post-retirement when I'm free, I'll go. But Arjuna did not learn Vedanta post-retirement. He learned it at the peak of his career. At the most important moment of his career, it is that Vedanta alone which helped him. So I think that to all the youngsters that are here, the fact that you're here itself is sign enough that this country has not forgotten what it has been handed over. And that trust is clear. It's clear in the questions that are coming as well. And Acharya, there is a question for you saying, what was the inclination that brought you to India and Vedanta, and how difficult was it to popularize it in Brazil or back home?
Well, by that time, I was in the stock market big company and doing consulting, strategy consulting. And life was going very well in material terms. I have no family, job, car, house. And something strange happened to me, because one day I was at the office, and I have to deal with these very high, powerful people, and I just looked to them, and then I saw how miserable they were. Say they were like poor millionaires. They have a lot of money, but at the same time,
Poor millionaires. Wow.
no. And if I continue on that line, I would become one of them. So I got very desperate. And by that time, I have no knowledge about yoga, Vedanta, or anything. So really speaking, I went to the to the window of my room and I prayed to the stars. That's how it will happen. And I said, if there is somebody there, because I was not a religious person, I said, I need help, And then I went to sleep. Next day morning, I wake up with the thought, I should do yoga, And with all my ideas, I want to learn yoga from an Indian. I had this in my mind, So how to find an Indian in Brazil. It took me some time, but I found an Indian. This Indian has done the 3-year course with Swami Shuddhidananda Saraswati and has just moved to Brazil. And he was also a Vedanta teacher. So Karma brought my teacher and then I connected to him. So that's how it started. Then I never stopped. I just kept going. And after some years, I met Puja Swamiji and things got.
The second part of the question is about how easy or how difficult was it to popularize Vedanta in Brazil? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have to make Vedanta in the West, available for people. We have to understand how the culture works, We cannot just, think that people will listen to a lecture and go for it, Like if people don't know what Vedanta is, they cannot desire to study Vedanta. So there is no point in putting lecture of Vedanta, Nobody knows what it is. So what people know is what they suffer, like the pain that they have in life, and they get rid of that, So I would name all those talks on like the subject that would be more sensitive for people that are on the audience, I would talk about relationship, emotional maturity, how to excel at work, but everything that was said, that was just a hook to get the personal attention. And then when the person is inside that frame and listening up like a karma yoga perspective of life, that really helps, then we explain like the purusharthas and like the purpose of life. And then some of them will awake, Then something very interesting happened because people would come not only to study Vedanta, but to be part of the movement that was happening. So I was not teaching alone. It was not like my effort alone for this knowledge to arrive to so much people, It's a big family, like big family of students and people that are dedicating sometimes 5 hours per day, or maybe their life have become that so that people could receive this knowledge. And Puja Swamiji's blessing was always there. And we are not afraid of technology. So now we did the Samba Shiva festival, some students, they said, teacher, what you are doing? Because how to get the attention of the youngsters in these universities that they're not interested in spirituality? I have to take my dhoti, my guitar, dance and sing. And I have this, I can do anything, And once they are paying attention, I just stop what I'm doing and tell Vedanta to them, like, nutshell. That's how we've been doing.
Spoiler alert for all of you, Acharya has brought his guitar today. So I think what Acharya talks about perfectly segues into the next segment, where we look at actualizing this Vedanta. Because Vedanta is a great topic intellectually, and we can keep discussing about it. But the biggest question remains, how does any individual practice that Vedanta? Of course, this conversation is an entry point into that world. This conversation is not meant to be the be-all, end-all. But what it can serve us is an opportunity to say, what can I start today? If you look at their journeys, if you look at what Acharya did, he took one step in one direction and the universe took 10,000 steps. because that is the way the frequency responds from above. When there is a punya sankalpam inside the Atma saying, this is what I want to move towards, I want to move within, then that knower of everything, that Paramatma, pulls the Jiva towards and reveals itself. So these seemingly small steps that we can take, but deeply powerful ones, I think we can spend a little bit of time understanding how we can actualize this Vedanta. Swamiji, I want to ask you in that context, in our homes and in our lives, how can we start to create space for Vedanta to emerge? Right from the formational or foundational age, where does that journey, that relationship with Vedanta begin?
Yes, this is a very enigmatic kind of a question, in the sense, when does really Vedanta start in our lives? When does that happen? I'm just reminded of the first sutra of the Brahma Sutras. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. The Brahma Jigyasa starts when? That's the main discussion there. Can we really start it just like that? That's a big, challenging thing. Anyhow, but without going into the technicalities of all that, very practically speaking, you see, when these great teachers like Shankaracharya and Vivekananda, they came to inform the humanity about this great treasure which is already existing. Now the question is how to make this treasure, take this treasure to the door of every human being. This is a big challenge. Somewhere a starting point we have to find. Who is interested? The question is, there's an interest factor here. Unless people know that Vedanta is the one thing which is indispensable to them, they won't turn towards Vedanta. Is it not? If you talk about today, if you, in the social media, you will find that how to earn, say, 1 crore rupees in 30 days, everybody will be interested for that. Is it not? But if you talk about a Vedanta course, unless you make them understand its relevance to them in their day-to-day life, people are not going to turn towards it. Is it not? So the biggest challenge is first to make the people understand the indispensability of this great treasure, this Brahma Vidya, without which no human being can be satisfied. So this is a big challenge. Where do we start? But the problem is, the best starting place would be the home itself. The first starting place would be the home itself. Now, when we talk about home, we have our parents. But do the parents know about it? If we just look into the present-day society, even Indian society, what to talk about the Western or, say, non-Indian societies, even Indian societies, those who profess themselves to be Hindus, many of the Hindus, they have no idea about Vedanta. That is the predicament and irony of the present situation. So how do we start it? Somewhere it has to start in the home itself. And I would always say that, you see, the real Vedanta starts in a human being's life through proper education. Again, this education term it needs little further elaboration. What do we mean by education? Education, the true sense is this Atma Vidya, which is the true education of the human being. And when does it start? According to, if we just go back by our Vedic ideas, views, this is a real education. Atma Vidya starts in the mother's womb itself. The real training of that soul in this Vidya starts in the mother's womb itself, according to our Vedas. When the child is conceived, from that time, if the mother is well informed about this, she who is living in that state of mind, she's already unconsciously injecting this Vidya into the mind of that baby which is in the womb. So you see, this was a great way of life which existed in this country, which got disrupted in the last 200 years, when we adopted a different kind of an education system which had no reference to this consciousness side. Is it not? We adopted an education system. This is meant for all of us to think and ruminate about it. Okay, what went wrong? In India, this is a land of Gurukula system where every student used to be informed about this great Brahma Vidya right from the very small, tender age. And they knew what is the goal of human life. Presently, whenever I look into the present day, our boys and girls, young generation, really, it really makes us feel sad. They are totally unaware about what is the main goal of human life. This is a situation. So somewhere a starting has to be made. We have to start. I personally feel our education system, we have to introduce this yoga and Upanishads in our education system itself in a very formal manner. The children should grow from the kindergarten itself. Yoga and this so-called the Atman idea should be the part of their rearing up. So tomorrow, if they see, without going into the politics of situation, see, we are a society. Politics is meant to manage the society. So we have to together think about bringing back this wisdom in our day-to-day life, even in our so-called schooling, so that our children can get this in the schools right in the tender age, and they will begin to be groomed in that way in a very systematic manner. So education system, this is not the education system which we had in this country. Swami Vivekananda was very passionate about it. He used to repeatedly say that we have to get back our ancient Gurukula system of education, which has totally disappeared. This present education system is, I won't say it is something wrong, but it is incomplete. It is only telling half of the story. The half of the story has not been told. This education system deals with the material dimension of the human being in the world. But where is the spiritual dimension? So this is perfectly fine. What we need to do is we need to add that which is missing.
Absolutely.
So that which is missing has to be added to it. This is ये ठीक ही है, इसमें कुछ गड़बड़ नहीं है, चल ही रहा है. But this is not going to take the human being to the acme of his or her potentials. That can happen when what is missing is added to it. That we have to collectively do it. Now, this is not only meant for India, this is meant for the entire world. Education everywhere where this spiritual side is missing needs to be added. One small statement which comes to, and I'm really tempted, Vivekananda. See, Vivekananda, when he was in London, he made a beautiful statement. See, they were rishis. They could foresee the future of humanity. And Vivekananda, he says in London, perhaps it was in 1896, he says, you see, I have just started my work in America. His words are very prophetic, electrifying. He's saying, I have just started my work at America. I've just raised one or two waves. We have to raise a tidal wave. The society has to be turned upside down. We have to give a new civilization to humanity. Swami Vivekananda was talking about giving a new civilization to humanity, my dear friends. What will be the form of this new civilization? This new civilization should have Adhyatma Vidya as its base. Without this Adhyatma Vidya, humanity is lost in the wilderness of this Anitya Prapancha. So that was the idea. So we need to, somewhere we have to start. Our education system is urgently needing a rehauling. We have to do it. And this Adhyatma Vidya should start from the family itself.
Thank you. Thank you, Swamiji. I think when we talk about starting that Adhyatma Vidya from the family, that's when the onus comes on the family. Children do not learn what is told to them. They learn what is done, what is being practiced. That is what they absorb. So the idea is not what books should I ask my children to read. The idea is, how can I start living that life of spirituality? How can I start being a Vedantin so that my children look at this and eventually that Vedanta will come, it will seep into their DNA. That's the question we need to be able to ask and then answer for ourselves. Acharya, on that same note, I want to ask you, when we look at bringing Vedanta into our lives, we also live in a time when there is a new term, there is a surfacing of a new term, which I don't want to get too much into the details of, but the idea of something called self-love, where we are doing things that we believe are gratifying for ourselves. Small acts of kindness, sometimes indulgence, whatever. Wearing new clothes and dressing up could be an act of self-love. Or saying, okay, today I've dieted for 1 week, so today I'm going to binge eat. That is self-love. But somewhere, is something like this taking us away from the larger idea of who the self is. Are we somewhere getting clouded in today's world by what the self is? And if so, how do we navigate that?
Before answering this question, there is something I would like to say on the previous one. So, Swamiji very beautifully explained like how education system is important. But I believe there is also another thing that has to be done. Vedanta properly is introduced when the person is, after his 20s, probably Mumukshutvam appears and then the person studies. We can, of course, go to universities and moments where the opinion is formatted in the mind, and that moment we can create awareness. That's how we did like the Samba Shiva, and many people do, like, let's create awareness that Vedanta exists and this is the message,
Beautiful.
But actually, there is something very important to do. What really resonates for generations and generations are the kathas, the stories. The stories that we listen in childhood. And these stories has been substituted even in this country,
Yes.
And it's not about teaching Vedanta. It's about let's say, the archetype of the teacher, the student, and that the person is suffering from some anxiety or some problem, and then he studies Vedanta and gets released from suffering. Although they don't know what Vedanta is, they should know this mechanism, from childhood. And the only way of doing is not doing a cartoon about Vedanta,
Yeah.
We have to do a cartoon about wherever they are interested, even if it's Peppa Pig. And then we introduce,
Vedanta too.
certainly Peppa Pig studied Vedanta and got enlightened.
Absolutely.
Then every kid will carry this forward.
Beautiful. I think that's such a vital backbone of this civilization, katha. The way kathas have been handed down, because if you look, today we trivialize katha. We treat it as if even within schools of philosophy, somewhere katha is treated as something that is not as important. But katha, when it is infused with the essence of spirituality, it can remain with us for our entire life. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to tell so many stories. The very first time in my life I came across the concept of Advaita was because of Paramahamsa. I remember this story where the story is about Ganesha in Kailasa and how he is playing with a cat. And he's playing with this little Ganapati is playing with this cat, and as any young child would, he doesn't really realize that it's only one-way street of playing. That cat is actually getting bullied by him. So he starts to poke the cat, he hits the cat a little bit. He doesn't do it because he's cruel. And this is not, oh my God, Ganapati did this. That's not the point of the story. So what happens is he continues to do this and the cat gets a little injured in the process and the cat runs away. Now Ganapati is done with this activity and he goes back to his mother Annapurna Devi because he's hungry. When he goes to her, Paramahamsa tells the story so beautifully that as soon as he sees her, he's shocked because the same injuries he saw on the cat, he sees on his mother's face. And that's when he realizes, oh my God, what just happened? Now, Paramahamsa used to tell this story with the objectivity, with the objective that we recognize that there is one strand of divinity which is running across this universe. You can tell a child this story, whether they grasp this much of philosophy or not, I can assure you 30 years later, they'll remember it. And it will protect them. It will remind them about the importance of kindness, the importance of oneness. So that is why I think that really kind of is a takeaway that we can all take with respect to how do you want to inculcate Vedanta? Bring kathas into their purview. Let them recognize the power of Advaita Bhavam that is hidden within these kathas. I think as we slowly, gradually come to a close, there are two pressing questions that I have, one for each of you. Swamiji, I want to ask you about this with respect to this civilization and the history, the past of the civilization. It's important for us to understand it today so that we can understand how we want to proceed from here. In the past, this country has given so much of focus to Tyaga and to Tapas. Again, words which are loosely translated as sacrifice and penance, although English falls very short when it comes to explaining the bhava of such words. But despite a country that focused entirely on such things, on Tyaga, where that was somewhere a backbone of thinking, of ideology, We were such an abundant country, so prosperous, though our entire focus was on giving away. What explains this? How do we understand how India had cracked that code then, and why we need to be able to go back to those today?
Actually, this is what we were discussing a little while ago. I was just talking to Vinay about this. Perhaps in the morning we were talking about it. You see, it's very interesting. Today, if you just look into our Indian psyche, even among the Hindus also, whenever we talk about Tyaga, people become scared. The word Tyaga is very scary for all of us. But actually speaking, I always say that you see, this Tyaga is the most beautiful thing to come into the human life. But we have to understand what this Tyaga actually means. And in this context, as Vinay also told in the morning, we were talking about it, I always say, you see, it's very interesting. If you just look into the roots of the Indian civilization stood on two pillars. Swami Vivekananda very passionately he speaks about this. One thing before I go ahead, I would request all the audience to take this very seriously. If you really want to understand Indian civilization, all of you should read lectures from Colombo to Almora. Please take it very seriously. If you really want to understand what Hinduism is, and if you want to know what India and Indian civilization and culture is, you all should very religiously read lectures from Colombo to Almora. Every page is electrifying. So there, Swami Vivekananda says, you see the two pillars, the twin pillars of Indian civilization has been Tyaga and Seva. Now the question comes, Tyaga and Seva, translated as Vinay told, see, many of these Sanskrit terms cannot be translated into English because English, actually speaking, is not sufficient. The vocabulary of the English is not sufficient to convey the dharmic ideas. This is a big problem when we translate these terms into English. So anyhow, the question is, this civilization which has always been completely standing on the two pillars of renunciation, at the same time, India has been the richest, most prosperous country in the history of humanity. It is only the last few centuries that everything went wrong, and we know, we don't have to go into the details of that. But India always existed as the richest and the most prosperous nation, one of the prosperous nations of all times. How did this happen? What was the economic philosophy of this land? I raise this question and I would invite researchers to research upon it. What was that system? But if I simply give you a straight answer, which Swami Vivekananda also hints at it, the system that was existing in this great country was the Varnashrama Dharma. This entire society was actually functioning based upon the principles of division of labor. Varna doesn't mean caste. These are all very sensitive issues. I don't know. We don't have much time to touch upon these things. We usually blame, this caste is one area which we keep on. We use it to attack a certain community. But really, Vedas don't talk about caste. Vedas talk about Varnas. And Varna literally means, it refers to a certain occupation which a human being takes up depending upon that person's gunas, tendencies, natural tendencies. So the entire Indian society was actually based upon this beautiful classification of human beings into different groups, doing different professions, which they voluntarily choose, freely choose. It is not imposed. These human beings, they would take up a certain profession which is based upon their natural inclination, a taste towards it, and that becomes the line of evolution for that person. And ashrama dharma. And in this varnashrama dharma, the basic principle was of sacrifice. Sacrifice in the sense of the sacrifice. This tyaga element was the very undercurrent of the so-called the way of life of the Indians. You see, whenever we just imagine, now this would be a very poetic picture in the present situation in India also, where we, all kinds of corruption which is existing in this land, and it's everywhere, it's there. There's nothing specific about India as such, but you can just imagine Everybody following the principle of sacrifice. Sacrifice means what? Living a life with utmost simplicity, a life which is not based upon an unbridled greed, greed which expresses itself and which goes to the extent of exploiting others. Absence of this tendency. Absence of the tendency to go and exploit others to one's own self-aggrandizement driven by the instincts of blind greed. Absence of this. Respecting everybody's space. When one society begins to practice this seriously, you will see automatically that society will prosper. Everybody will get what everybody deserves. Nothing is actually, no one will be deprived. This naturally happens. When human beings become corrupt and they become governed by this tendency of greed, what happens is we are amassing wealth by depriving others. This is what is happening globally. Somebody is taking away wealth in wrong means, using wrong means and methods, and is depriving others. So this is not the way for the society to actually evolve. So in India, the society actually grew and evolved. It became, this Abhyudaya came based upon this principle of sacrifice, which is the essential prana of dharma. This dharma idea, dharma, artha, kama and moksha, and dharma, righteousness, in which the spirit of sacrifice is inherent. So this is one very important thing which we have to think about. India was the richest country in the world when it was actually based upon the principles of renunciation, sacrifice. It is a very wonderful thing. In fact, I would say that the experts in this field all over the world have to make a study of how did India become so rich when practicing Tyaga and Seva. This should be a field of investigation for all the experts in this field.
Beautiful. Thank you, Swamiji. So I think before we come to that question, Acharya, I just want to understand your take on this, because you come from a land that is geographically far away, but spiritually you belong to this land. You belong to the wisdom of this land. It goes without saying that Bhagavad Pada, Swami Vivekananda, and countless such Divya Purushas have been role models for you. How do you think we can bring that back to a civilization to make us look at such people and say, yes, these are the kind of role models I want to be able to have? What would you suggest to all of us in that younger generation about how we can do that?
There is a sense of like self-value that should be extended to our nation, like our culture. This is something that we lose it, on all this information that we receive. So unless I value what I have and this place that I am, nobody will value it, So it starts with let's say the owners that are holding this knowledge and all this tradition, to, let's say, pass this energy to the other people, Like, I believe this is all a matter of, how Shraddha is transferred, Sometimes we see in the West, people starting spiritual groups and doing things, and they have to be very courageous and have to work a lot because there is no supportive system, there is no temple, there is nobody that even know what you are doing. And sometimes you are like a hermit, like doing what you have to do, and even your friends, they don't understand, But there is a passion that you have, that you received from your own gurus and parampara, and actually this Shraddha is spreading, So the strength of this Shraddha in ourselves, it's what's going to reverberate, not only in India, but everywhere. Because nowadays with the internet and everything, there is no boundaries. What is India, what is not India. Whatever is happening everywhere, So also the influencers, the people that, let's say, are the voices, that everybody hear, these people should be tackled, Previously, everything would be done based on, like governmental recognition and all that. Nowadays, a YouTube channel has more impact than a television channel, much more, So we have to understand that the rule is different, and uh, sometimes we look down to ourselves with what we have because it's very easy. And even like to study Vedanta today is very easy. In the past, it was not like that. You have to climb the Himalayas, find a teacher, leave your life behind, so that you can open Tattva Bodha, So now, how do we make it, people value that, So this energy of bringing the value and making people bring the sacrifice, but in a different way, like not in terms of, money or whatever. That's not the point, but like make them value what they are receiving. If we give it them so easily, they think this thing has no value, So there is a psychological process that we have to make the society go through,
Thank you, Acharya. I know I'm getting a lot of very angry stares because there is a mountain of questions here. And while I would love to make space for each of them, I also understand the paucity of time that we have. We had committed that this would be a 90-minute sessions, and if we delay this conversation, then other things get impacted. What I would encourage all of you is something that I do for myself when I attend conversations like this, is to stay with the question. I think we need to come out of that need for instant gratification that if I ask now, this is not ChatGPT, what's happening here? You don't get an answer in 20 seconds. So if the question is pressing, if the question is with you, let the question remain with you. The answer will also arrive. If time permits, Swamiji and Acharya may be here for a conversation later, but I don't know, so I cannot commit about that. But if your question has not been vocally answered today, be assured that the Divine will find a way of answering it in some way or the other. I think on behalf of all of you, I just want to extend gratitude to Swamiji and to Acharya for giving us not just their time and their energy, but their pranam, which was invested with every word that they spoke in. I think that is a blessing for all of us. There is a wonderful sampradayam that you all followed today, which was to remove your footwear outside and to come in here. Many of us don't know why we do this, but we do it when we go into sacred spaces, because the idea is when we are in any space where there is a divine energy, be it if it is consecrated in a murti or if it is moving in physical form as you see here, when you are in the presence of such ground where that energy is, your feet absorb that energy and pass it on to the rest of your body. Be assured that you have all absorbed that energy of whatever got created here this evening. And for that, we have the team of Ekatma Dham to thank for facilitating this satsangam for all of us today, and Swamiji and Acharya for giving us all of those blessings today. So with that note of gratitude, thank you for being such a wonderful, involved and a pulsating audience. I hope that you will carry that pulse on as the evening and your sadhana journey continues beyond this.